Happy birthday, Zoro. So, I gotta tell ya, context clues are a bit of an earth shaker, aren't they? Because in a very recent Vivicard drop, we found out that Dracul Mihawk does not have Conqueror's Hockey. He has Observation and Armament. But you know who does have Conqueror's Hockey? Roronoa Zoro. With that being said, I came to some thoughts about good old Mihawk here. What if, just what if Yoru isn't his sword? Meaning Yoru isn't black because of him, but is black perhaps because of someone in the Dracul family, but not him. Because one, when characters are given family names, those family names mean something. So there's probably a Dracul clan, and the Yoru is most likely a family heirloom passed down to him, which would make sense given how jewel encrusted and gaudy it is. But thinking about Zoro's ancestor, Shimmonsuke Ryuma. Shimmonsuke Ryuma is a very interesting character, especially in the Netflix adaptation of Monsters, because he is called a few things in that special, and he's called a few things too during Wano within the manga of One Piece. Because, okay, in the special, towards the end, he's called Ryuma the King. Very interesting. In the manga, he's referred to, one, as the legendary samurai, and two, as the deity of the blade, the sword deity. Okay, so that's two very big titles to describe someone, but it's describing him as a conqueror, as a king, as someone of status. Famously, Mihawk, despite his title as the world's strongest swordsman, I never ever hear him referred to as a king or a deity of any sort. What I hear is that he's a very powerful swordsman, and he is noted for having sharp eyes, hawk eyes, but nothing else. Referred to as the strongest, referred to as Hawkeyes, and referred to as someone who hunts marines, but never a sword deity, never a king, never a legendary anything, which is weird, very weird. The strongest, yes, but never legendary. So here's what I'm thinking. I think Mihawk is in a very similar situation to where Zoro was in for a great swath of the story, thinking about it now, because Zoro inherited the family heirloom, you could say, of Susui. Susui is the legendary black blade held by Ryuma, okay? So, Susui has been black for presumably a very long period of time, because even in the Monster Special, Susui is black. That being said, it's very likely that Mihawk, like Zoro, inherited Yoru from somebody else. With that being said, too, on the concept of a permanently black blade as a whole, I'm starting to lean towards the idea that Conquerors is needed to make a blade permanently black, because the goalposts of things have gone like this. You don't have hockey, you have hockey, you have Conqueror's hockey, and then you can use Conqueror's hockey offensively through coating yourself or your weapon with it. That's how things have gone. Those are the steps, right, that we've seen so far. So with that being said, I'm starting to think you need Conquerors in order to make your blade black. You need to dominate the being of the blade in order to infect your will permanently within it. That's what I'm starting to come to, because that's the only thing that makes sense to me. Because we've seen everything else, and just due to the sheer amount of people in the One Piece world now who can utilize armament, it can't be just basic armament. It can't be. Because everybody in the New World, even cronies and organizations, have used armored hockey. Armored hockey is not special. Conquerors is a bit more special, just having it. But once you have it, it can be trained. So then the trained version of Conquerors is then perceived at the top of the verse at this point, whereas regular Conquerors is just the starting point. So I'm willing to bet that you would need to coat your blade in Conquerors to dominate the innards of the blade, the composition of the blade. All the atoms that make up the blade need to be dominated by your will in order for it to be blackened. That's the only thing that could possibly make sense at this point in the narrative, because everything else just doesn't add up. So, with that being said, I think Zoro is on the right track for that being a possibility, seeing as how he has displayed the use of Conquerors and Conquerors offensively, whereas Mihawk has not. It could be filled in later. This could totally be wrong. All of this could be wrong. This theory could be wrong. But based on what the Vivid card says, Mihawk only has observation of what we've seen and armament. But the funny thing about him having armament is that his sword is already black. So it kind of adds a little bit of narrative sneakiness, because if he was turning his blade black this entire time through the use of armament coating, you would not see it. I find that very funny within itself, but we've seen the observation. We've seen it, or we've seen what could be perceived as observation. With that being said, I'm going to take a stab in the dark here and say this is because, unlike Zoro and unlike Ryuma, presumably, Mihawk does not want to be a king. He said this out his mouth specifically when Cross Guild was being formed. Even though he could be an emperor, he does not want to be an emperor. He has no ambitions of being a king. That is why this makes sense for his character, because he simply does not care about the title. He simply is as a swordsman. So his raw skill simply is, which makes a lot of sense. So as it stands now, one could say that, yeah, even though he doesn't have Conquerors, you can get very, very far without Conquerors, because the caliber of your observation and your armament is that high. With that being said, too, it would make sense for him to just be the shining example of that based off of what we know. But based on there being only 2 Black Blades in the series, and one of them belonging to a man named King, or at least called King, and is called deity and all these things, and one whom is not called these things, one could say that, yeah, Ryuma turned his sword black, but Mihawk got his blade from somewhere else. That has to be the case. But with that being said, I'm willing to bet if anybody in Cross Guild were to develop Conquerors just based on their history, it would be Buggy. Because Buggy has been around several Conquerors users throughout his lifetime. So if anybody were to develop Conquerors throughout the narrative, it would be him. It would actually be funny if he developed his hockey in reverse, as well, similar to Luffy, I should say, because Luffy got Conquerors first before he got anything else. So Buggy could be on a very similar path. But that's what I think. Give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Paula Pede. What's it?